Hello and welcome to this episode of Sounds Heal Podcast. I am your host, Natalie Brown, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue to explore the fields of sound healing, sound therapy, and generally the use of sound for health and wellness. Today, our guest is John Yost, who has studied with master drummers all around the world. And John, with his company Rhythm Revolution, has been leading rhythm-based events for more than 30 years. He's a certified drum facilitator by the Drum Circle Facilitators Guild and Village Music Circle, for which he is a global trainer. And he studied with Arthur Hall at Arthur's first teacher training. John and I talk about his background in music and drumming and how this all developed for him. We also talk about how drums can help people connect with themselves within and also with others. We talk about John's fascination with gongs and how that began and how he's begun to offer sound meditations. And we just have a really wonderful conversation about sound, about listening, drumming, and connecting within and with others using sound. This podcast is sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa, located in Sarasota, Florida. At the shop in person, you will be able to experience their luxury spa, as well as their vast showroom of vibrational tools. They also host classes and trainings, and online at theomshop.com, you are able to look through their products and see that they really have such a vast array of vibrational tools and connect with them as well. They can really help advise and guide you as you're looking to up-level your sound healing practice. So thank you so much to the Om Shop and Spa for their support and sponsorship of this podcast. And please enjoy this episode with John Yost. All right. Well, thanks again, John, for joining me today to talk a little bit about you. And, I think it'd be great to start with more about you, but especially your, youngster John, the young person that got started in music. How did that start for you? And how did the drums spark in your life?
Well, that's a funny question and a funny story. Well, it's funny now, but it wasn't so funny then. I'm the middle of 9 kids. And so my father always had this vision of having a band, some kind of a band that all the kids would be involved in. Although he wasn't really a musician, he would play like organ once a year. He'd play like Spanish Eyes for like 3 hours. So he had this vision of having a band. And at some point he's like, well, you can play the tuba. So, you start band in like 3rd or 4th grade. And I went there and they're like, well, he weighs 40 pounds. He's not going to play a 60-pound tuba. So they put me on French horn, which was fine for the first year because there were, the most beautiful girl in the whole school played French horn. And there was only 2 of us. So I would just stare at her and kind of fake it. And she graduates. And the next year, the band director's cueing me. And I'm just like, burp, burp. I would play like 1 note every 3 measures or something. And he realizes I can't really play. And so he tells my parents that I could use some private lessons. So I'm doing my private lessons and I'm practicing. And my mom says, go upstairs and practice and don't come down. So I come down, to get some water with the horn in my hand. And my mom's like, I told you not to come down. It's only been 10 minutes. And I'm like, but and she's like, don't talk back to me, and I'm like, Mom, and she's like, go back up there. I don't want to hear it. And I'm like, she's like, that's it. No dinner. Right. And then I'm like, Mom, that's it. You're grounded. So I said, I'm never going to play this blankety blank horn again. And I threw it down on the stairs, put a dent in the bell of the horn, just like a stair. It was kind of like a cartoon, except for in real life. So it wasn't very funny in real life. Um, and so my dad took it back to the instrument shop, and him and the teacher cooked it up and pulled the bell out, and it's still kind of wrinkly. And he brought it back to me. I said, you're not hearing me. I said, I'm never going to play this thing again. And so my father said, okay, you have to play something. What's it going to be? And so I said, oh, drums. I want to play drums. And so I switched to drums. And, when you start, if you're in the concert band, you play a cymbal or you play, a bass drum, they start you there. And then eventually you kind of graduate to the snare drum. And I really started, liking hitting things. Although my parents wouldn't buy drums because of my last episode, and they wanted to make sure I would stick with it. So I just had sticks, and I would just play the paneling. I'd play everything in the house, and eventually, I got some money from my grandma. She gave me some money, and I bought like an old Ludwig set. And my brother, just older than me, had switched from sax to bass, so he was playing bass guitar, and there was always people at the house jamming. And eventually, the little kid got to play with the big kids. And so I started playing drum set. I played drum set, in all kinds of rock and pop, and got a degree in percussion. Was originally an music ed major. And at some point, I took a K through 6 class or something, and the woman was doing drum circles, basically kind of an ORP version of a drum circle. And I was going for secondary ed, and I was like, lady, if you think I'm going to do this in an inner city school, you're crazy. In an inner city high school. And she's like, well, maybe you shouldn't be a teacher. And I said, you know what? You're right. And I quit my teaching degree, and I went into performance. And I tried mass media, video. I was doing a lot of that. And then I was still playing drum set. And one day I was at a gig on the lake, and there were some Afro-Cuban guys just throwing down. And a guy had some bongos, and he stepped away to smoke. I'm like, can I play those? And he's like, yeah, go ahead. So I'm playing along, and time just seemed to stand still. And so the girl I was with is like, let's go. I'm like, it's been 10 minutes. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, it's been 3 hours. So I was like, okay, I want to do more of this. And then I just started calling my drum set students and saying, hey, we're going to jam. Bring any small percussion kind of stuff you have, bongos or whatever. And so they started coming, and Stuart Copeland, who was the drummer of the Rhythmatists, drummer of the Police, had a tour called the Rhythmatists. And he had Le Ballet du Percussion du Guinée, the Guinean ballet, which was djembe, dun and dance. And I saw the djembe, and I'm like, I got to have one of those. And so I bought a doumbek because the music school I was teaching at didn't have any djembes. They just had a doumbek, and it was the same shape. I'm like, okay, I'll start there. And eventually I got a djembe. I started taking lessons with the Senegalese guy, Yaya Cabo, and just started following that path. So I went to Hawaii to study with Arthur Hull, drum circle facilitation. And then the next year I went to Japan to study taiko, because I saw taiko Arthur's drum camp in Hawaii, and I kind of got really interested in that. And then the next year I went to Africa, and the next year I went back to Japan, and next year I went back to Hawaii, and kind of this cycle of um, following following the muse of those drums. And you know, my my experience with gongs were as a classical percussionist, and so my wife was a massage therapist and Reiki and all that. She was always interested in the metal, and she had gone to like some kind of jams where they would use crystal bowls and well, more metal bowls and little kind of percussion, not really big gongs. And at one point, she bought me this gong up here. This it's like a 30-inch chow, and so that kind of led me on the slippery slope of gongs, where I had, I mean, that was like a $700 gong, right? Which is kind of a cheap gong in a sense when you look at the big picture of gongs. Then I started breaking out all my old uh, instruments, weapons of mass percussion, my brushes and my, different mallets, my yarn mallets and everything, and trying them on the gong. And it was the subtlety that really kind of sucked me into the gong, where it's like, wow, there's so many sounds coming out of this, which I never experienced as a percussionist, because the only time we really used the gong was at the apex of a piece. We'd warm it up while the orchestra's, starting to climax, and then blam, and that's it. Nobody's listening to it. It's just a big effect, and you're not really deeply listening to it. And I just really got kind of captivated, and I was like, wow, if this cheap gong's like this, what are the expensive ones like? So I shouldn't have said that out loud, because my wife heard that, and then she bought me. I think she bought me this one, which is this wind gong, and that is it's obviously a different animal. It plays differently than the chow, and it plays very differently than the Pisces play. So I ended up getting a Pisces, and then kind of inheriting this other Pisces, and they all seem to respond differently to the input. And the other thing that really kind of excited me about the gong was the mystery as to exactly what was going to come out after I hit it, because unlike a drum or a marimba, um, it's very expected, the response you're going to get from that hit, the initial hit, the second hit, the third hit. The gong is vastly different than that. It seems like obviously the room that you're in has a big effect on which harmonics are coming back to you, and how that gong is going to respond in that space. So the idea of putting a certain amount of energy in, and then that expanding and multiplying in a different way, has been exciting, an exciting path for me. And that's what kind of has sucked me into the gong world. And of course, since my wife bought me some gongs, I bought her some bowls, and we started doing events, and after using things on ourselves and our friends, we started expanding into yoga studios and some corporate events and things like that. And it's a pretty nice mix, because she kind of comes from the energetic field of playing with no music theory or anything like that per se, and I'm coming from kind of a musical background into the energetic background. So it's a really nice meld. of musicality and intention.
Yeah, I can see how, as a percussionist, with all your years of experience, and the way you learn the drum, it is the way you play it, it is predictable. If I play it this way, if I use that mallet, this is what it's going to sound like. So then to approach the
Mm-hmm.
gong, perhaps with one of your percussion mallets, there's an element of surprise, like, oh, that's different. I didn't expect that. Or you try a different mallet and realize that they're just so complex. So I bet that was a nice kind of stretch for you to approach the gong, because you never know what's going to happen. They can be very unpredictable. Yeah, very cool. Well, I want to unpack a couple of those things you mentioned. And I think one thing you mentioned quickly, but I think is pretty cool, and maybe has a lot to do with kind of your mission when it comes to leading drum circles, is that you did take Arthur Hull's first teacher facilitator training, right, in Hawaii. And I know that's what would have been in the 90s probably, but that was very pivotal for the launch of the village music circles, and I'm sure a really pivotal launch for the work that you're facilitating. What was that experience like? How did it change your perception, not only as a drummer, but how you would teach this to others?
Well, so I kind of encapsulated it into my mission statement, which is, to connect people to themselves and their communities, using music as a metaphor to do that. So for, the first thing about going to that training was that first training had all of the top people that were doing any kind of drumming at the time. Sule Greg Wilson, who wrote The Drummer's Path, Paolo Mattioli, Greg Atkinson. There were just so many shredders and leaders in the field. So, and Arthur's co-teachers were Cameron Tummel and Don Davidson. And so, I learned as much from them as I did from Arthur at that camp, as well as all the other people there, and not necessarily just in terms of drumming. And obviously that is, the music, the in the moment music made there in Hawaii on that island, we would play all night and all day. And it would be some of the most profound, magical music I've ever made in my life. And to be, on the shores of Oahu, on the ocean, playing all night with people who are deeply listening and who have, the skill sets and awareness, to make that was magical. So super profound. And a lot of egos were there, and it was great for me because I was pretty new to it all. And then to really just learn it's not about me. So I was like most people when they first try something in front of a bunch of experts. I was pretty petrified to get into the circle and to do these things. And the culminating experience was a massive drum circle on downtown Oahu in this big band show. And there were probably like 300 people. So that was kind of like the first drum circle I ever led, a portion of that large circle. So that was really crazy. And I could just say it was like surfing, the energy of 300 people. And my skill sets weren't really super developed at that point. But my intention was there, and I was fully committed and congruent in that moment. So people did follow me, following me. So it was quite quite a rush and quite a great uh, trial by fire baptism in that. So after that, I came back and I was leading 5 drum circles a day, 5 days a week for the Chicago Park District um, with day camps. So that was a uh, real great way to practice. That's 25 sets a week for 6 weeks. And after the 3rd day, my voice was gone. So I had to almost entirely rely on nonverbal communication. And that was extremely beneficial for me in that I really got to hone those skills in a way that's served me, immensely since then. And if you want to practice, you practice with the kids because they're going to give you that straight, honest feedback right away. And you'll, if they don't understand, they won't respond, or they'll respond in a different way. So it really teaches you the value of your communication and how you are communicating and via the response you're getting.
Yeah, and I'm sure those early years of teaching just really influenced how you would approach different situations as well. What do you get when someone says, "Oh, I can't keep a beat," or some people, or I mean, just like singing, or "I can't hold a tune." Do you ever get people that feel like, "I can't find the rhythm"?
Absolutely. You have people who will come in to a situation with a lot of uh, hesitation, baggage. You could call it trauma if you like, maybe brought on by some music teacher somewhere, or not. Someone who said you can't hold a tune, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. I don't focus on that at all. What I focus on is getting them out of their head and into the moment, into their body. If they're actively listening, I tell them you don't have to hold a beat. You listen. When you hear a space that your note's going to sound good, put it in that space. There's no wrong notes. You can't make a mistake. Lots of times those people will be the people standing there like this with their arms crossed. And so if they're standing there, maybe around the circle or what have you, I'll walk up with a tambourine or something and I'll say, "Could you hold this for me?" And most people are not going to say no. They'll be saying like, "Could you hold this for me?" And they're like, okay, because they don't want to say no. And once they have it in their hand, they're like, or they're saying, I can't do this or whatever. I'm like, just hold that for me. Whatever you do, don't shake it. Don't play it, right? And they'll laugh, and then eventually they're in, and then maybe they'll gravitate to something else, or they'll be like, "Oh, this is harmless enough. I can play this," right? And then maybe I'll say, "Okay, everybody switch." Hand the instrument to the person to the left, and they try something else. But that happens all the time. And there's lots of tricks that Arthur teaches, and now I teach his curriculum that helps to get people out of that. So that whatever that is, I never want to focus on what we don't want. I want to focus on what we do want. So what do we want? Right? And some people don't know that they want. And really, I feel, and that's out of fear, usually, but I feel that music is such a pure form of communication that, like you were expressing in that conversation about when you might lead a group and you start with drums, and then it helps the people to bond pretty quickly because they're only communicating with their heart and with their ears and actively listening. So when that's happening, it's music is the universal language. People love the blues almost everywhere you go, right? You'll see people who love the blues. oh my gosh, the blues. They just love music. The other thing is, I feel like if I say red, if I just mention the color red to somebody, well, if you're from, maybe the West, you think of red and you think of, oh, blood. That's a, stop. That's a stop sign, right? But if you're from China, the wedding dress is red, right? So that might represent something completely different to you, depending on your cultural context. But if you hear ding or boom, right? Unless you have some trauma from some type of sound, how is that going to be? How is that going to be interpreted, right? So I can only hallucinate as to how that's interpreted. But from what I've experienced and what I've seen people experience, once they get into it, it it can definitely open them up, and it can definitely connect them.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing about drumming and drum circles is that you're keeping time, but as soon as you get in it, you lose time. I mean, just like you mentioned, that experience you had where it was 3 hours. I mean, yeah, if you can just let go and be in it and be in the wave of sound, everything else just takes over. You're just in it, and those kind of worries fade away. So if someone can just kind of take that leap and start playing the tambourine, it will happen. Yeah. Now, you've facilitated circles in all kinds of different situations, festivals, corporations, schools, all kinds of situations. And I know some of the benefits have come up as we're talking, but what do you think the overarching benefits of people drumming together would be?
That's huge. And I can only hallucinate as to what those benefits are, because all these studies are trying to validify what we do with sound and what we do with drumming. Um, Everybody knows since the dawn of time, the shamans were using, voice and, instruments to journey, to heal, and to connect. So we all know innately that this is helpful and this is beneficial to us, but we're trying to get the science to prove it. And there's all kinds of studies that are happening, and there's all kinds of things um, in of course the sound field as well as the music field. Obviously, if you listen to classical music as a baby, you're going to be a genius, right? So is that proven? They're doing studies to try to prove it. And for me, none of that really matters. What matters is, how does it make people feel, and how does it make them move forward? And whatever metaphors you want to draw out for a group, you're going to do that with the intention of what that client is hiring you to do, right? So if they say, we want to talk about team building, well, you're a bunch of professionals with incredible amounts of experience at what you do. Now we've leveled the playing field. We've brought you in here. You've just made a product. You've made a product doing something you've never done before. I don't care if you're a classical pianist. I've given you one note to work with. I've given you another way to access that note. It's not what you're used to, and it's not in a form that you're used to. It's not written on the paper. You have to find your place, and you have to contribute to the team. You have to contribute to the product. You have to make that product better with no expertise. So now, if you take that metaphor and you put it into what you do every single day with your expertise, how much better can your product be? how much better can your team be? How much better can your country be? How much better, where do you want to take it? So there's just so much there that we can draw from. And as long as people are listening and acting and interacting, right? That's that connection. And sometimes that connection can be with yourself, with your own sacred instrument. And that sacred instrument could be a box or a pot and a pan. If you're there and you're really listening, you can get this connection between you and that instrument as a vehicle to do that. So I know from my personal experience, I've gotten that, right? And it's very powerful, which is why I want to share it with the world. And the world has rewarded me for sharing that, because I've followed my heart, and I've followed that path. So it's about, what's your intention? Where do you want to go? And are you open to it? So which way do you want to go? Which way do you want to, whatever that is, you're right. You're going to get exactly what you're thinking about. So, and I really feel like the instruments amplify that. They amplify the intention you're putting in.
Right. You could think of them as a mirror, right? A reflection of your own energy and intention. I love your initial answer there. You're so right about us always needing data and research and show me. But actually, if we want to know the benefits of the drum or the gong or the bowls, we'll experience them, and then you'll know the benefits of the drum, the gongs, and the bowls, right? It's really experiencing them, because there could be universal benefits, but there certainly we are unique individuals and how they affect us. So there's a different benefit, different answer for each person. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and at each time, because the first time I
Right.
really kind of had a drum circle experience, it was completely negative for me. It was negative. Because of where I was, because I really didn't want to be a teacher at that time. I was always teaching. I knew I could always be teaching, but I wanted to be performing, right? So that wasn't a performance. That wasn't what I was seeking, right? I was seeking something, and I wasn't ready for that experience. It wasn't until I was tired of performing, actually, and truth be told, I was tired of playing 2 and 4 so that the guitar players could solo all night. And then when they get tired, they go take a break, have a couple of beers and whatever else. You do a 20-minute solo by yourself. Nobody is comping for you, right? Then they come back and expect you to play for an hour and a half more, right? So, that drumming experience for me was so freeing, because people were actually holding it down while I got to say something. Well, I got to be the icing on the cake and not the cake, right? So that was something that really kind of opened me up. And it also was one of those situations where there were also conversations happening, within that moment, that I wasn't really getting between, my rock band kind of situation. And the jazz band, yes, but it's still different. I still had a role that I needed to constantly be filling in that. So yeah, it was really cool.
Okay, so with all that you're doing, maybe just kind of let us know a bit about what that looks like. Rhythm Revolution, you've got the Sound Magic Project. Kind of, not only what are you facilitating, what seems to be kind of taking the most time or energy? What are you invested the most in? But what are you also the most curious about? What are you kind of really leaning into right now when it comes to your work and your passion?
I find that, I have a lot of things happening. I'm teaching taiko. I have a taiko group. I'm teaching djembe. I have a kind of a loose knit group of people we put together to do different shows, and then we have the sound, uh, kind of my sound magic. It's called myself and my wife, and sometimes special guests depending on the situation. And so I'm really kind of focusing. Right now, things have opened up, so I'm kind of getting hit from all angles. Where it's I'm getting calls for school drum circles, corporate drum circles, all those types of things. We have some scheduled sound immersions on the book, and then the taiko stuff usually kind of comes out of left field, where I'm constantly teaching and trying to put new stuff in, um, and keep the old stuff polished, and then just always trying to move myself forward personally, and keep my practices up. And so I just kind of find that, like, right now, because everything's opening up again, I've been really busy with just kind of keeping up with things, and knowing these are the things I want to do. Everything's pretty much set to do it, but I have to do a lot of maintenance on everything, it seems like. So I'm just kind of getting back in that groove. And summer was just here, so summer, was huge. Just did 17 sets at Lollapalooza. It's a 4-day thing, and a couple other, festivals, and a large thing for the Field Museum, which was like, I don't know, I think it was like 400 boomwhackers, the donors, and a group of global ambassadors, uh, musicians. So, an Indian guy playing tabla, and Brazilian guy, and West African guy, and so this big group of 10 global ambassadors were kind of my band or backline for that boomwhacker experience. So those types of things have been keeping me very busy. So right now it's really about maintaining and keeping all these things running at the same time, and my family. Got a couple of kids, and we got to make sure that the boy gets to football, and the girl gets to art class. So school's about to start, which is also fun. It's a transition to keep all these things running. And also working on setting up a 501c3 nonprofit, so that I can continue to look for other opportunities, and realize some of the other visions that I have. And those are in the works. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Ooh, I want to ask more, but maybe you can't say anything yet what that looks like. So yeah. Well, that's a lot to balance. That's a lot to balance, and with everything you've got going on. But gosh, if you're passionate about something and it's so diverse what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work, or not all the time, at least. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a calling. It's something that really, you know I'm super passionate about, and it is pretty much uh, my life and lifestyle to be doing those things, which you really gotta have to have to want to do this to do it, because even if you're just doing gong stuff,
just hauling those 4 gongs around and those stands and the bowls and all that. That's a big job. So we make it look easy and we make it look fun. But there's definitely a good amount of work and sweat and money and energy between, even booking and promoting and schlepping. So there's a lot of energy that goes out, and then being ready to put that intention and that energy and that program together in a meaningful way it's a lot. But it's I feel like it's very worthwhile, and I think you know our community needs it, and the world needs it. And we found through the pandemic, we were doing gong immersions pretty much every Sunday night, live, Facebook Live for free. For if people wanted to donate, fine, great. If not, it was just something we felt like we could do. And we started with just my phone, ended up getting a nicer, camera with some condensers and kind of trying to get that experience better. But it was something we could do when there was not much else people could do, right? I mean, couldn't leave the house really. So we just, brought it to them. And we got a lot of positive response from that. And hopefully it helped people. And, that we're all in service. If we're in this kind of field, we are in service. And it's at some point it's how can I serve, right? And then there's also the point of I can't serve if I can't eat. So we have to balance that as well.
Yeah, and that question of who can I serve? I mean, it's just limitless because everybody does need it. So you almost have to follow, um, what draws you in and what fills you up as well in your community. So yeah, that's wonderful that you found ways to have that reach during the pandemic, and I'm sure it helped you and your wife as well, just to be immersed in that kind of project and the gongs and all that as well. So yeah, it was just so beautiful to see what so many people were offering during that time and just keep people going. And it's great that you're getting busy again in person. So it's great. Yeah. Well, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Yeah. It's so wonderful to hear about you and more about your path. And it's just inspiring, when you hear someone that's fully on their path, fully following it, and it's just taken you so many wonderful places and situations. I mean, what is it, 30 years now since the Arthur Hull training? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I met my wife at my drum circle. She showed up at my drum circle. And about a year later, I was in a small town in the Czech Republic getting married in a castle. So that was kind of magical and interesting. But you know, these kinds of things, they connect people and they connect communities. And when I'm holding events, I can only imagine why people are actually coming to the event. Some people might come to a drum circle because they love drums. Some people just might be curious about drums. Some people come because they love to dance. Some people might come because they're looking to meet other people, right? And sometimes they don't even know they want to meet other people, but they still meet other people. And it's great when you gather, because you never know what's gonna happen from that. And definitely now more than ever, people need to be connected, and they need connection to each other, and they need connection to themselves, because it's been a very, very difficult 2+ years, and it looks like we're coming out, and hopefully, we keep coming out, and but as we see when we're coming out, there's other agendas out there, and it's, the world is in turmoil, and we need to communicate better. So hopefully people like you and me can do that and help to be that bridge that can give people some peace.
Absolutely beautifully said. And it's just a time for people to show up for themselves so that we can connect and communicate in these ways where we just have a knowing. Like, you don't even necessarily need to find the words. The drums can help you bond and raise that energy and raise that intention without maybe having to even agree in world events, right? I mean, it's just a beautiful way to see that there's so much more, and that, yeah, we can kind of smooth out differences or negate that turmoil just by connecting
Well, if
with
they show
others.
up for not just themselves, if they show up for each other, that's even better. And maybe they don't know that they're showing up for each other. Maybe they think they're showing up for themselves. But then, the magic takes over, where we have this situation where it's like, now I can be empathetic. I've learned to listen instead of constantly, speak about what I want, right? Maybe I listen to what you need, because I need this and you need that, and maybe there's that middle ground. We're seeming not to do that right now.
There you go. Yeah.
People are like, no, it's about me, and there's no me, and we should have learned that in this pandemic. There's no me. It's all us. It's all us. It's one earth. We're all on the same earth. It's one humanity. We're all the same humanity.
Yeah.
We need to move this forward.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah. And to focus on that we are all connected, but also it's the time of listening, to really tune in to that art of listening, and to be more open to that. Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a
Thanks,
pleasure
Natalie,
to.
for having me.
Yeah, it's been really wonderful to hear your perspective, and obviously a bit about your journey, but also how you've approached all this in your life, for your own benefits and growth, but truly for others. And I'm sure it's just, you were talking about the schlepping and the shuffle, but gosh, when you're in the moment and seeing that magic and that spark in others, there's nothing better. That's what it's all about. Yeah.
I would say so.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks, John. I appreciate your time.
Much, Natalie.
Okay. You take
Have
care.
a great day.
You too.
Ciao.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Sounds Heal Podcast, sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa. You can keep up to date with what's coming up next at soundshealstudio.com. Check things out on Facebook at Sounds Heal Studio, and you can listen to all previous podcasts as well as music meditations on the YouTube channel at Sounds Heal Studio. Be well and stay tuned.